They say the ocean always calls to us, offering a kind of solace in the midst of chaos. But for me, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore only reminds me of the silence that has taken over my life. A silence left by a man who never truly saw me, and children who seem to have forgotten the sacrifices I've made. This is my story, a journey through the hurt, betrayal, and the freedom that came too late. Before I begin, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe and join me as we go through this painful yet cathartic chapter of my life. My name is Maggie Turner, and I am 70 years old. I never imagined that I would spend my days like this, alone, fighting for a space in a world that once belonged to my family. A house by the beach, a dream we all had for so long, now feels like a prison to me. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when it was a place of laughter, of love, or at least the illusion of it. But after Edward died 3 years ago, everything changed. Edward, he was the kind of man who could command a room just by walking into it, a man whose presence was both a blessing and a curse. To our children, Jessica and Daniel, he was everything. The man they looked up to, the one they believed could do no wrong. But for me, Edward was a shadow I was trapped under for most of my life. He was cruel, controlling, selfish. I loved him, or I tried to, but that love was always strained by the reality of who he truly was. I don't think our marriage was ever about love. It was about keeping up appearances. I spent years sacrificing my own desires for the sake of our family, trying to make things work. I gave up dreams, ambitions, even my own happiness, because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. I kept the house intact, made sure the kids were happy, made sure Edward was content. I kept pushing through. But when he died, it felt like the world had crumbled beneath my feet. It wasn't just the grief of losing him that hurt. It was the fact that in his death, I was left with a mountain of debt. Edward had never shared anything with me. His finances, his worries, his plans. He kept it all locked away. And when he was gone, I found myself struggling to keep the house, the one place that had once been filled with family, now teetering on the edge of collapse. I never asked for this. I never asked to carry this burden. Yet here I am. Jessica and Daniel, they don't see it. They never saw it. Jessica, with her perfect life, always so focused on her image, her wedding plans, her dreams, she has no idea what I've gone through. Daniel, well, Daniel has always been the one to fall in line, always deferring to Jessica, always going along with what she says. As I sit in this house now, the only sound is the ocean. I feel its rhythm, its constant motion, but I'm stuck in this place, stuck in the past. The emptiness echoes in every room. Edward's absence feels like an open wound, one that never heals. And now, my children don't even see me. They only see what they want to see. I thought this house, this place, would always be mine. But now, it feels like I'm fighting for something I'm not sure I even want anymore. Something that has become a reminder of everything I've lost, of the dreams I buried. But there's something I know for sure. No matter how much I try to ignore it, my world is changing. It's been changing ever since Edward passed. I feel it in my bones. A shift, a crack in the foundation of everything I've known. And I can't help but wonder, is this the beginning of something new? Or is it just the end of everything I ever hoped for? I can't stay here forever. Not in this silence. Something needs to change. The day Jessica got engaged should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. I was thrilled for her, of course. She was my only daughter, and to see her so excited about a new chapter, about her future, was something I should have relished. But as with everything in my life, joy was short-lived. When Jessica decided to have her wedding at our house by the beach, I felt this mix of emotions: joy, pride, and even a little sadness, because I knew it would never be the same. The house, so full of memories, seemed like the perfect setting for such an important occasion. In my mind, it was a dream come true, a way for me to pass something beautiful on to her, something that had meant so much to me. I couldn't help but imagine her walking down the stairs in her wedding dress, Edward by her side, though now I realize it was just a fantasy I was clinging to. But as the wedding plans began to take shape, I started to see a side of Jessica I hadn't noticed before. She started pointing out flaws in the house, things that to me were beautiful. "Mom, this place is so outdated," she said one afternoon, standing in the middle of the living room, her arms crossed in a judgmental way. I mean, who decorates a beach house like this? It's so, well, not Instagram worthy, you know? I felt the sting of her words, but I tried to play it off. After all, it was her special day, right? I thought you might like it here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's been in the family for so long, and there are so many memories. But Jessica wasn't interested in memories. She started listing all the things that needed to be fixed: the chipped paint on the walls, the outdated furniture, the cracked tiles in the bathroom. No one's going to want to come here if it looks like this, Mom. It's embarrassing. And that was when I realized she didn't care about the history of this house, the time we spent together as a family, or the sacrifices I made to keep it. She saw it as a backdrop for her perfect life, a backdrop that didn't meet her standards. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell her that this house was more than just an aesthetic, more than a place to throw a lavish wedding. It was where we spent our summers, where the sounds of laughter and love filled the air. But I didn't. I couldn't, because I didn't want to upset her, and in a way, I still believed that I needed to keep her happy. So I allowed her to make her demands. The list of renovations grew longer and longer. It seemed like every time she looked at something, it wasn't good enough. The paint color is terrible. This rug needs to go. We can't have the wedding here if it looks like it's from the 80s. I tried to hold it together, but inside, I felt a sharp pain. She was disregarding everything I'd worked for, everything I had put my heart into, and with each passing day, that pain deepened. My house, my sanctuary, was no longer my own. It was becoming something else, something that belonged to her vision of perfection, something I couldn't reach. And with every word, every complaint, I felt more and more like I didn't matter at all. I started to question myself. Had I ever mattered to her? Or was I just a tool to help her achieve her dreams? A background figure in the story of her life. As I sat alone in the living room one evening, staring at the changes she demanded, I could feel the weight of it all pressing on my chest. This was not how it was supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to be invisible. I wasn't supposed to be the one to sacrifice everything for others. But here I was, again, holding the pieces of something that was slipping through my fingers. I had spent my life giving, trying to make everyone happy, but what had it gotten me? Nothing. Not a single moment where I was the priority. Not a single moment where my dreams were considered. And so the wedding planning continued. But with it came a quiet resignation in my heart. I wasn't the mother who would be included in the joy of this day. I was the mother who was expected to step aside, to make way for the perfect event, the perfect day. I was a background character in my own life. I tried not to let it get to me, but every time Jessica walked through the door, her mind consumed with ideas for her perfect wedding, the hurt gnawed at me. And when she finally picked out the perfect date and refused to consider the season's weather, I couldn't help but wonder, had I ever been truly seen? As the wedding day approached, I realized that everything was slipping away from me. The house, my place in the family, my role as a mother. I tried to hold on to the dream, but I knew now that this wasn't about love or family. It was about appearances, about doing what looked good on the outside. And when I walked into the kitchen one day, hoping for a moment of connection, to hear a simple thank you for everything I had done, I found Jessica standing there on the phone with her wedding planner, discussing the smallest of details, like the color of the napkins. There was no thank you, no recognition of everything I had sacrificed to make her dream come true. I was invisible, yet again, and as the sound of her laughter echoed through the house, I realized that I had been nothing more than an afterthought in her life. If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that silence can be as deafening as 1,000 screams. And right now, the silence in my life is overwhelming, especially when it comes to the house and everything Edward left behind. I remember how we used to dream about this place, the house by the beach, our sanctuary. Edward always talked about it as if it were the key to our happiness. We'd walk the shores together, hand in hand, and he'd say that this house would be the legacy we left behind, a place our children would come to, generation after generation. I believed it too. I thought for a while that this house was a symbol of our love, of everything we had built together. But now it's just a reminder of the lies, of everything that wasn't said, everything that was left unspoken. After Edward passed, the dream crumbled. The debts, the bills, the constant weight of them hanging over me. They started as whispers, but soon they were all I could hear. Edward never shared anything with me, not the finances, not the worry. I always assumed everything was taken care of, that he had things under control. But after his death, I realized just how much of a lie that was. I was left with a mess, a financial mess that I could barely comprehend. It didn't help that I had to keep up appearances, especially with Jessica and Daniel. They were grieving too, I understood that. But their grief was different from mine. They didn't have to deal with the bills, the mortgage, the looming threat of losing the one thing that had been mine, our home. They didn't have to make hard decisions every day, like I did. They had their own lives, their own ways of coping, and that's fine. But it only left me with more loneliness. The house, which once felt like a warm embrace, now felt like an anchor around my neck, pulling me down with every passing month. Jessica had no idea what I was going through. She was so caught up in her wedding plans, and Daniel? Well, Daniel had always been the quiet one, but I knew he would side with her. I knew where his loyalty lay. I kept trying to make it work. I used the small savings I had, my retirement funds, just to make the next payment. But the numbers didn't add up. I was stuck, and every time I paid another bill, another mortgage statement, I could feel my world closing in. I remember one night, sitting at the kitchen table with the lights dimmed low, the papers scattered around me. I tried to make sense of it all, but the numbers blurred together. I could feel my chest tightening with every passing second, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I couldn't keep fighting a battle that was already lost. And so, as much as I hated the thought, I knew what I had to do. I had to sell the house. It wasn't something I wanted to do. It wasn't something I ever imagined myself doing. But the reality was simple. The house was no longer mine to keep. It was a symbol of the life I thought I had, the life I had dreamed of, but it was also a prison. The longer I held on to it, the more I sank into a financial quicksand that I couldn't escape. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt a sense of relief as I made the call to the real estate agent. The house was no longer a place of sanctuary for me. It was just a reminder of everything I had lost, of the man who had taken so much from me, of the children who didn't understand. It had become a burden, a weight I could no longer carry. I knew I was doing the right thing, but it didn't make the decision any easier. It didn't make it hurt any less. As much as I was desperate to let go of the house, a part of me still clung to the memories, the beach, the laughter, the warmth that used to fill these walls. But as I sat there that night, staring at the phone in my hand, I knew that I was doing something for myself for the first time in years, and that scared me. I had this idea, this fragile, hopeful idea that maybe, just maybe, my family still cared about me. Maybe there was still a place for me in their lives, even if I wasn't the one throwing the lavish wedding or making the perfect dinner for them anymore. Edward was gone. The house was becoming too much for me to handle, but I still had my children, or so I thought. It was approaching my birthday, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope for something simple, something real. I decided to ask for something that I thought was reasonable. After all, we hadn't shared a meal together in ages. What harm would it do to ask for one evening, just one night, where we could sit down as a family and remember the old times? I didn't want anything extravagant. I didn't want presents or speeches or grand gestures. I just wanted a dinner. I wanted the feeling of my children in the same room again, laughing, talking, just being there for me like they used to. So, I called Jessica and Daniel, and as casually as I could manage, I said, "You know, my birthday is coming up. It's been a while since we've all been together, just us three. I'd really love it if you could come over for a family dinner, you know, like we used to do." I could hear the hesitation in their voices, even through the phone. Jessica said something about her busy schedule, and Daniel mumbled that he would try to make it. It wasn't the enthusiastic response I had imagined, but I convinced myself it was enough. Maybe they were busy, maybe they didn't realize how important it was to me, but I believed they would come through. So I spent days preparing. I cooked the meal that always brought everyone together when they were younger. Chicken, potatoes, salad, and of course, dessert. I even baked their favorite cake, the one that Jessica always begged for, with the thick layer of chocolate frosting. I made sure the table was set just so. Nice plates, soft lighting, a few candles. I wanted it to be perfect, even though I knew that nothing would ever be perfect again. But I held on to the illusion that perhaps this evening could be something that brought us back together. Just for one night. The day of my birthday arrived, and I spent the morning cleaning, setting everything up. I told myself that even if they came a little late, it would still be worth it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. Yet, I simply wanted the company of my children. As the hours passed, the dinner grew cold. The chicken wasn't tender anymore, and the potatoes, though still warm, had lost their softness. The cake sat untouched. I sat at the table, my hands folded in my lap, a knot forming in my stomach. I checked the clock again, and again. I called Jessica's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again, a little more desperate. Nothing. By then, the night had slipped away. The sky outside had darkened, the evening air colder, but I sat there, waiting for the sound of a knock on the door. Finally, I dialed Daniel's number. He picked up on the first ring, sounding almost distracted. "Oh, hey, Mom," he said, his voice faint, as if he were far away. "Is it today? I thought it was tomorrow. I'm with the kids right now and—" "Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll celebrate next time, okay?" I felt the heat rise in my chest. I wasn't angry yet, but the hurt was there, thick and suffocating. "You forgot, didn't you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the tears pricking at the back of my eyes. Daniel hesitated. "Look, I'm sorry, Mom. I'll make it up to you, I promise." His words were empty, just like his tone. I could hear the noise of children in the background, the sounds of his busy life that didn't include me, but I still tried to hold on to some semblance of hope. "It's okay. Just come over when you can." I hung up the phone with my heart sinking in my chest. I sent Jessica a message next, but she didn't reply right away. I waited. Minutes felt like hours. When I finally saw that she had read it, my hands trembled. The message came 2 days later, and it felt like a punch to my gut. "I totally forgot. Been really busy." That was it. No sorry, no acknowledgement of what I had done for them over the years, nothing. Just words that echoed in the empty house around me. I could feel my chest tightening, the suffocating realization creeping in that I had never really mattered to them. Not truly. That night I sat at the table, the cake uneaten, the food growing cold. The silence wrapped itself around me like a heavy blanket. The tears came then, but there was no one to see them, no one to comfort me. I had been a good mother. I had done everything I could. I had given them my heart, my energy, my entire life. And this is how they repaid me? With indifference? As I sat there alone, staring at the empty chairs, the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My children didn't see me. They never had. They only saw what I could give them. And once they had all they needed, I was forgotten. But that night, as I cleaned up the mess they had left behind, something in me shifted. I was done waiting, done hoping, done sacrificing. I had given them everything. I spent hours that night staring at the remnants of my birthday dinner, the untouched cake now sitting on the counter, a cruel reminder of what had just happened. It was as if the table itself was mocking me. The plates, half set, the candles burnt down to nothing, all of it, a stark contrast to the warmth and laughter I'd imagined. I had hoped for something small, something genuine, but instead, I was left in this house, surrounded by my own loneliness, with only the sound of the ocean crashing outside to keep me company. The sadness wasn't the worst part. It was the emptiness. It was the realization that, in my own family, I was just an afterthought, a shadow in their busy, perfect lives. That night, the hurt settled in deep, like a stone in my chest, and it didn't leave. Not for days. I don't know why I kept expecting things to be different. Maybe it was because I had always tried to be the good mother, the good wife, the good woman, always putting everyone else first. Always believing that if I gave enough, they would eventually see me. But after that night, I knew better. Jessica's message, so cold and dismissive, echoed in my head. It wasn't just that she forgot. It was the way she dismissed it, as though it didn't matter to her at all. I wasn't just a mother to her. I was an inconvenience, something she could easily forget when it suited her. And Daniel's response? The same. A promise to make it up to me that would never come true. Empty words, just like all the promises I had given them over the years. I was tired. I was tired of pretending, tired of hoping. I'd been invisible for so long. I wasn't sure I even knew how to be seen anymore. The next morning, I woke up with the weight of it all pressing on me like an unbearable fog. But the fog was lifting, just enough to see what I had to do. It wasn't just about my children anymore. It wasn't about keeping up appearances. I didn't need their approval, their validation, their empty promises. I needed to save myself. I knew that my whole life had been about making them happy, about making Edward happy. I had spent decades putting everyone before me, sacrificing my own happiness, my own dreams, all for them. And what had it gotten me? Betrayal, disappointment, heartache. And yet, there I was, still trying to please them, still trying to make them care. But not anymore. I made a decision that would forever change the course of my life. It wasn't a decision I wanted to make, but it was the only one left for me. I would sell the house. It hurt to even think about it, but it had become clear that this house, this place I had loved, had become a symbol of everything I'd lost. The dreams I once had for my family, the memories of days long past. It all felt like an anchor, weighing me down. But more than that, I needed the financial freedom. The debt, the constant pressure to keep the house, to keep up with payments. It was choking me. It was making me small, invisible, and I couldn't live like that anymore. I called a real estate agent that afternoon, after weeks of wrestling with myself. I told him I wanted to sell, and I wanted it done quickly. No turning back, no more hoping that things would get better, no more clinging to the past. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of relief, a sliver of freedom. The weight of the house, of the debts, of the expectations, all lifted just a little. I could see the door opening, the possibility of something new, something for me, and it terrified me. I spent the next few days preparing for the sale, cleaning out closets, sorting through the things that had accumulated over the years. The memories were suffocating me. Old family photos, Edward's things, his clothes still hanging in the closet, his books on the shelf. Every corner of the house whispered his name. It was like I was suffocating in my own memories. I took down the pictures of Jessica and Daniel from the walls. The smiles in those photographs seemed so distant now, like they were taken in another lifetime. I couldn't stand to look at them. Every time I did, I saw the faces of two people who didn't understand me, who didn't see me. I didn't want them to find out this way. I didn't want them to be shocked, to feel like I had betrayed them. But I knew I couldn't wait anymore. I was doing this for me, not for them, not for anyone else. I would finally have a life of my own. As I closed the door to the house for the last time, the sound of the ocean crashing against the shore felt different. The waves still roared, but now they sounded more like a goodbye. I was walking away from the past, from the family I had built in my mind, from the dreams that never came true. And even though the house was no longer mine, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of control, a sense of freedom. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I still had a long way to go. The days that followed the sale of the house were a whirlwind. There was a strange sort of peace that I had never known before. It was as if, for the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. The decision had been made, and I was moving on. But I knew that eventually, my children would find out. I just didn't realize how soon that would be. It happened one afternoon. I was sitting at the small apartment I had rented, a simple place by the bay, far from the house I had once thought would be my forever home. The phone rang, and I saw Jessica's name flash across the screen. For a brief moment I hesitated. My heart still held onto the small glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, this call would be different. Maybe she was calling to check on me. Maybe she had realized how much she had hurt me, and she wanted to make things right. I picked up the phone. "Mom." Jessica's voice was sharp, panicked. "What the hell did you do?" My stomach sank. I had known this moment was coming, but hearing it out loud made it real. "What do you mean, Jessica?" "The house," she spat, her voice rising with every word. "You sold the house? Without telling us? How could you do that? I was planning my wedding there. I thought you would want to keep it for us, for the family, for me." I closed my eyes for a moment, the anger that I had been holding back threatening to surface. I tried to stay calm, tried to remind myself that this conversation wasn't about the house. It was about everything that had been building up between us, everything I had been ignoring for far too long. "I did it because I had to," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. "You don't know the half of it, Jessica. This house was a burden, a weight I couldn't carry anymore. I needed to sell it. It was my decision, my life. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her breathing, the silence heavy with disbelief. And then she spoke, her words dripping with resentment. "You should have told me," she snapped. "I thought you were different. You were supposed to be there for me, and now you've taken the one thing I was counting on. You've ruined everything." I could feel the hurt in her words, but I wasn't sure if it was the hurt of losing the house or the hurt of realizing just how little she really cared about me. "I didn't ruin anything, Jessica. You've been so wrapped up in your perfect life that you haven't seen what I've been going through. I did this for me. Not for you, not for anyone else. I've spent my whole life making everyone else happy. But I'm done. I've lived my life for you and your father, and I've been forgotten. Now, I'm finally doing something for myself." There was no response for a long time. I could almost hear her trying to digest what I had said, but I wasn't sure it was sinking in. Her anger was still loud, still all-consuming. "You always make everything about you, Mom. I can't believe you'd be so selfish," she said bitterly. "I'm not being selfish," I retorted. "I'm taking back control of my life. Maybe you'll understand that someday." Jessica's voice was practically trembling with emotion now. "You know, Dad would never have done this. He would have kept the house for us. He would have made sure we had it, because he actually cared about the family." My blood ran cold. Edward. She had to bring him into this. The man who had been nothing but a cruel, selfish ghost for most of our lives. The man who had never truly seen me, never truly cared about me or anyone else. The man who had left me with mountains of debt and a broken heart. "Your father was a selfish man," I said, my voice cutting through the phone. "He wasn't the hero you think he was. He was controlling, aggressive, and he left me with nothing but debt and disappointment. He didn't care about this family. He didn't care about me." There was a long silence. I could feel the air between us grow thick with unspoken words. Jessica didn't reply right away, but when she did, her words were colder than I had ever heard them. "You're wrong," she said flatly. "He was a great man, and you just didn't see it. You've always made him the villain in your story." I felt a lump form in my throat. How could she still idolize him after everything he had put us through? "You don't know what it was like, Jessica. He was cruel to me, to everyone around him. You never saw it, because you were too busy adoring him, too busy living in his shadow. He left me with nothing. No support, no love, no partnership. And now I'm the one cleaning up the mess." "Whatever, Mom. I don't want to argue about this. But I can't believe you'd sell the house and ruin everything I've worked for. I'm done with this. Don't expect me to be okay with it." And with that, she hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, my mind reeling. Jessica had never been able to see me. Not truly. She had always seen what she wanted to see. The perfect father, the perfect family. Even when everything around her was falling apart, she was blinded by her idolization of a man who had never deserved it. I had hoped, just once, she would understand, that she would see the truth. But instead, she chose to keep her blinders on, to stay wrapped up in the fantasy of a man who was long gone. I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to reach her, but in that moment, I knew something for sure. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to beg for her love or approval. I wasn't going to live in the shadow of the man who had never given me anything but heartbreak. The house was gone, but in its place, I was finally starting to find myself. It would take time, but I knew one thing. I was done being invisible, and if Jessica couldn't see me for who I truly was, that was her loss. The day Daniel found out about the sale of the house, I could feel the tension rising before he even said a word. He called me, his voice low, as if trying to mask the disappointment, but I could hear it clearly. He was upset. He wasn't just angry about the house. He was angry at me, and I was tired of it. "Mom, why did you do it? Why did you sell the house without talking to anyone?" His voice was tight, controlled, but I could feel the accusation in his words. "Why?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Because it was my decision, Daniel. Because it was what I needed to do. The house was a burden I couldn't carry anymore. The debts were crushing me, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine." He didn't respond right away, and I could hear him shifting around on the other end of the line, probably trying to figure out how to make me feel guilty. But Jessica was planning everything around that house, Mom. Her wedding was going to be there. Everything. It was all set. You knew how important it was to her. I knew what was important to her, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. But let me remind you, Daniel, I was the one who sacrificed everything to make sure she had what she wanted, for years. And what did I get in return? A daughter who doesn't even see me. A son who can't stand up for me. You two never asked what I needed. Never asked if I was happy. You think her wedding is the most important thing. But you've both forgotten about the years I spent keeping this family together. The years I spent being invisible. There was a long silence, and I knew he was struggling to find a response that wouldn't make me even angrier. But I was done holding back. I was done being their mother, their martyr, the one who gave up her own life for everyone else. "Mom," Daniel finally said, his voice quieter now, but I could hear the resentment still underneath. "I just think you were too impulsive. You could have talked to us. You should have thought this through." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, mirthless sound. "Impulsive? You call this impulsive?" I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "I've spent my whole life being thoughtful, being careful, always considering what everyone else wanted, but not anymore. I don't care about your plans, or Jessica's wedding, or anyone else's expectations. This was my choice, and I'm done apologizing for it." Daniel was quiet again, and when he spoke next, I could hear the distance between us widening. "I can't believe you're making this all about you, Mom. Jessica was depending on that house. You don't understand how much it meant to her. This isn't how it should have gone." His words stung more than I wanted to admit, but instead of crumbling under them, I found something inside me, something fierce, something that had been buried for so long. "You're right, Daniel. I don't understand how much it meant to Jessica, because you know what? She never asked how I was doing. She never asked how I was feeling, how I was struggling. I gave up everything for her, and for you, but I don't expect you to understand. You've always been on her side, and that's fine, but I'm done." I took a deep breath, not letting the tears well up this time. "I'm done with you both. I'm done being the person you call when you need something. I'm done being the person who takes the blame, the person who sacrifices everything and gets nothing in return. You want to blame me? Fine. But you've both lost the only person who ever put you first." There was no response from him, and I knew it was because he didn't have one. And as I sat there holding the phone in my hand, the silence settled over me like a blanket. It wasn't comforting. It was cold, but it was mine. And I realized, in that moment, that I was finally free. The house had been sold. The debts were paid. The weight that had shackled me for so long was gone, and with it, the illusion of being needed. I no longer had to wear the mask of the mother, the wife, the woman who existed only to serve others. I could finally breathe. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to fight for a place in the world. I didn't have to beg for love. I didn't have to apologize for living for myself. "I'm done," I whispered to no one in particular, staring out at the view from my small new apartment. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and endless. It felt like freedom. The phone was still in my hand, but I didn't call Daniel back. I didn't reach out to Jessica either. They had their lives, and I had mine. If they chose to stay angry, to stay distant, that was their choice. I had done what I needed to do. I was no longer just a background character in their lives. I was finally living for me, and that scared me. But it also made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Months passed in a blur of solitude. Jessica and Daniel never reached out. No phone calls, no messages, no check-ins. It was as if I had never existed in their lives at all. It wasn't surprising. Not really. I had expected the distance. Still, the silence that enveloped me was suffocating, even in its finality. I spent my days in my small apartment, a stark contrast to the sprawling house by the beach. The walls were bare, save for a few photographs I had reluctantly decided to keep. Photos of the kids when they were little, when we were all together, and I foolishly believed that everything would stay that way forever. The ocean outside my window still called to me, but it felt like a distant friend now, one I couldn't quite touch, no matter how much I wished to. I kept myself busy, not by working. There was no need for that anymore, but by filling my days with small routines. I read more, walked along the shoreline in the early mornings, and occasionally met people for coffee. But the truth was, I was living in a quiet, empty space, a place where memories and regrets collided in the silence. And then, one evening, as I scrolled through my phone, a notification caught my eye. It was from Jessica. A post on Facebook with a photo of her in a beautiful white dress. It didn't take me long to figure out what it was. Her wedding. I felt the air leave my lungs as I stared at the picture. There she was, smiling, radiant, her eyes shining with the happiness that had always been so distant from me. She looked perfect, as I had always imagined she would, and there I was, not there, a ghost once again, invisible in the background of her life. My heart sank. The pain wasn't just in the fact that I wasn't invited to her wedding, though that cut deep. It was in the realization that she had moved on without me, that my absence didn't matter. I wasn't even a footnote in her life anymore. The mother who had given everything to her, who had built her up, was now nothing more than a distant memory. The tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed over the months finally came, but they weren't the kind of tears I expected. They weren't tears of desperation or betrayal, though I felt both. No, they were tears of acceptance. In that moment, I understood what had happened. Jessica had never seen me for who I was. She had only ever seen what I could provide for her, what I could give. And now that I had nothing left to offer, I was no longer needed. The realization settled deep within me, and as painful as it was, there was a strange sense of freedom that came with it. I wasn't a mother who would be a part of her perfect world. I wasn't a figure in her life anymore. I was free, but the sadness lingered. Even in my newfound freedom, there was a deep ache in my chest, a hole that nothing could fill. I was left with the image of Jessica in her wedding dress, the woman who had once been my little girl, now a stranger, someone who would never understand the depth of the sacrifices I made. I wished I could reach out, tell her how much it hurt, how much I missed the daughter I thought I had. But I knew better now. It wasn't my place to try to fix something that had never been mine to begin with. Still, there was a part of me that couldn't stop wondering, was this it? Was this the life I was meant to have? I tried not to think about it. I tried not to dwell on what could have been, on the relationship that could have been saved if only things had been different. But every now and then, I would catch myself wondering what could have happened if I had just held on a little longer, if I had just tried harder. But those thoughts only made the ache sharper, and so I pushed them aside. I focused on the small things. I began to focus more on myself, something I hadn't done in decades. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to try, but never had the time for. I started walking further down the beach, as if walking away from my past, from the ghosts of the life I had lived. I started to feel a little less lost, a little more me. I couldn't change what had happened, couldn't force Jessica to understand, but I could choose to live my life in a way that was mine. The house was gone, and the family I had given everything to was no longer mine. But I was still here. I was still breathing, and for the first time in a long time, I was starting to feel like I might actually be okay. And then, one morning, as I sat by the window with my coffee, I saw a couple walking hand in hand along the beach. They were laughing, their steps light in the early morning sun, their happiness spilling over in waves. I didn't know them, but in that moment, something shifted inside of me. I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. Not the kind that comes from family or from others, but the kind that comes from accepting who I was, from being okay with the woman I had become. Maybe the life I was meant to live wasn't one of sacrifice and quiet misery. Maybe, for once, it could be mine. I had become so used to the silence. Months had passed without a single word from either of my children, and I had grown accustomed to the loneliness. In the quiet of my small apartment, I had found my own rhythm, my own routine. The pain of their absence never fully faded, but I learned to live with it. There was a certain numbness that took over, a shell I wore to protect myself from the hurt that still lurked beneath the surface. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I thought I had imagined it. But the sound came again, louder this time. My heart raced, a mix of surprise and hesitation rushing through me. I walked toward the door, unsure of who would be standing on the other side. When I opened it, I couldn't believe my eyes. There stood Daniel, his face hesitant but sincere, his wife beside him, and 2 children, my grandchildren, looking up at me with wide, curious eyes. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice trembling slightly. "Can we come in?" For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, my mind racing, trying to comprehend what was happening. After months of silence, months of feeling abandoned, here was my son, standing at my door. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile as I stepped aside to let them in. They entered the small apartment, Daniel looking around with a quiet kind of awe. His wife, a woman I had met only briefly years ago, gave me a warm smile, though I could tell she was just as unsure as he was. The children were still shy, but I could see them taking in their surroundings, unsure of how to approach the situation. We all sat down in the modest living room, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. I didn't know what to say, what could be said. They had all been gone for so long, and the space between us felt vast, like a canyon that had only grown wider with time. Finally, it was Daniel who broke the silence. "Mom," he began, his voice quiet but full of emotion. "I know I've failed you. I know I've been a terrible son. I've been absent, distant, and I don't know how to make up for it, but I want to try. I should have been there for you. You didn't deserve to be left alone like that. I promise, I'll do better. I'll visit more. I'll be more present. I know I've hurt you." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had dreamed of hearing them, of hearing some acknowledgement of the pain I'd carried alone for so long. And yet, as much as I wanted to accept his apology, as much as a part of me longed to pull him into my arms and tell him everything would be okay, there was a part of me that couldn't quite let go of the years of neglect. I looked at him, this man who was my son, but who had in so many ways become a stranger to me. I wanted to forgive him. I wanted to believe that his apology was enough. But the truth was, forgiveness wasn't as simple as a few words. "Thank you, Daniel," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I appreciate your words. I really do. But I can't just pretend that everything is okay. It's been a long time, and I've carried this hurt for so long. I've had to learn how to live without you, without your presence in my life, and it hasn't been easy." He lowered his gaze, clearly ashamed. His wife reached over and placed a hand on his arm, a silent gesture of support. I appreciated it, but it didn't change the fact that so much had been lost. I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had been left unsaid, unsolved. "I know, Mom," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I've failed you. I know it, and I can't take that back. But I'm here now. I want to be here. I want to make things right." The words felt good. They really did. But I couldn't ignore the emptiness that lingered, the space between us that no apology could fill. I sighed deeply and looked at him, searching for the strength I needed to say what I had been avoiding. "Daniel, I don't know if I can just forget everything. I don't know if I can just jump back into the way things were. I need time to heal from the years of being ignored. I've spent so long hoping you'd see me, hoping you'd care. And I can't just erase that." Daniel nodded, his eyes filled with regret. He didn't know what else to say, and I didn't know how to comfort him. What could I say when I still wasn't sure what I needed? The conversation shifted then, and Daniel's tone became more serious. "There's something else I need to tell you." "Mom," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he glanced over at his wife. "I've been worried about Jessica. I know you haven't heard from her either, but I see how she is, and it's not good. The wedding, everything, it seemed perfect, but I don't think it is. She's not happy, Mom. I don't think she's ever been happy in that marriage." I froze, a chill running through me. I had tried so hard to stay out of it, to let Jessica live her life without my interference. But now, hearing Daniel's words, a knot formed in my chest. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly troubled. "I don't know exactly, but I can see it. The way she's changed, the way she acts, the way he treats her, it's not right. I don't like the way he talks to her. I don't like the way he controls her. It's like she's becoming someone else, someone I don't even recognize." My heart ached at the thought of Jessica, my daughter, the little girl I had raised, feeling trapped, feeling small. But I couldn't let myself get sucked into the cycle again. I couldn't keep trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix. "I can't help her, Daniel," I said, my voice steady despite the pain that burned inside. I tried for years, but she doesn't want me in her life. She doesn't want my help. As much as I love her, I can't keep pushing myself into her world when she's made it clear she doesn't want me there." Daniel's face softened, and I could see the understanding in his eyes. He knew. He understood what I was saying, even if it hurt. "I know, Mom," he whispered, "but maybe, just maybe, if you reach out, if you try again, she'll see that you're there for her." I shook my head gently. "No, Daniel, she has to come to me. I can't keep chasing after her. I've done that for so long, and it's never worked. I've tried to be the mother she needed, but right now, all I can do is wait Wait for her to come back to me when she's ready." There was a heavy silence in the room, and for a moment, all I could hear was the distant sound of the waves crashing against the shore. The distance between us, the children I had given everything for, the daughter I had tried to save, was still there. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally letting go of the past. A few days later, it was just another quiet evening, and I had nearly forgotten what it felt like to be disturbed by a ringing phone. I had spent days in a quiet, strange peace, if you could call it that, where I was beginning to adjust to the silence. I had let go of the idea of ever being close to my children again. They had their lives, and I had mine. And then, the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, my heart tightening in my chest. It was Jessica. I hadn't heard from her in so long. The last time I saw her name pop up on my phone, it was for a brief, detached message, a reminder of how far we had drifted apart. But this time, there was something different, something urgent in the way the phone rang, and something in the pit of my stomach told me this call would be unlike any of the others. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling just slightly. "Mom?" Jessica's voice came through, and it was cracked, fragile. There was no pretense this time, no distance, just pain. I couldn't even speak at first. I waited for her to continue, my own breath held in the tension of the moment. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't even know how to say this, but I need you to know. I've been horrible to you. I was a babaka, and I know it. I was cruel, and now I don't know what to do." Her voice trembled, breaking as she spoke, and the sound of her tears on the other end of the line caught me off guard. Jessica, my strong, independent daughter, always the one to push me away, was crying. And it was unlike any cry I had ever heard from her. This wasn't the anger or resentment I had grown accustomed to. This was real pain. For a moment, I felt my own emotions start to rise, the hurt that I had buried so deep inside of me. The years of neglect, the constant rejection, all bubbled up in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I needed to listen. I needed to let her say whatever it was that had brought her here, to this point of raw honesty. "I'm not okay, Mom," Jessica continued, her voice barely audible through her sobs. I don't know how to fix things. I don't know how to make it better, but I need you to know that I'm so sorry. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need it." I felt my heart break as I listened, not because of the apology, but because of what was coming next. I knew that something had broken inside her, something that had forced her to face the truth. I found out that he's been cheating on me," Jessica whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "And it's worse than that. He's getting aggressive. He's been treating me like I don't matter, like I'm nothing. And I don't know what to do anymore, Mom. I need to leave him. I don't know how, but I know I can't stay. I feel so lost." The words hit me like a wave, pulling the air from my lungs. I hadn't been prepared for this, not in the way I thought I might be. I had always known something was wrong, knew that Jessica had been trapped in a relationship that wasn't healthy. But to hear her say it, to hear the vulnerability in her voice, it was a shock. The pain she was going through, the fear, it was so real, and it tore at me. I had warned her. I had tried so hard to protect her from the mistakes I saw her making, but she hadn't listened. She never did. Now, here she was, broken, shattered by the very man she had married, the same kind of man I had warned her about, the same kind of man I had suffered through. And yet, as I listened to her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sorrow and, strangely, relief. Sorrow for the pain she was enduring now. Relief because finally, after all these years, she was seeing the truth for herself. She was seeing what I had been trying to show her for so long, even when she refused to hear it. "I've tried to protect you, Jessica. I've always tried to warn you," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "I told you that he wasn't good for you, that he was controlling, that he would treat you like you didn't matter. But you never wanted to listen. You were so wrapped up in the idea of him, in your perfect life, that you didn't see the danger. I did see it, Jessica, and now you're paying the price." There was silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But when she spoke, her voice was quiet, full of regret. "I know, Mom. I know. I was so stupid, so cruel to you. I was too proud to see the truth. And now I realize how wrong I was. I treated you like you were nothing, and I've been so selfish." I felt the weight of her words press down on me. but I refused to soften my tone. She needed to hear it. You have a lot to learn, Jessica, and I can't always be the one to protect you. I've done my part. I've been your mother, even when you didn't want me to be. But now, it's time for you to grow up. You need to face your mistakes and learn from them. I can't keep saving you from everything. I don't want to be like him, Mom. I don't want to repeat the same mistakes. I don't want to be that person anymore. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Her words were filled with such raw pain, such deep regret, that it almost broke me. I wanted to hold her, to tell her it would all be okay, but I knew better now. She needed to face this on her own. She needed to find her strength. You have a long way to go. Jessica, I said, my voice softening just a little. But yes, I forgive you. I'm not going to keep holding on to the past. You're my daughter, and I love you. I've always loved you. But I can't keep being the one who always tries to save you from your mistakes. If you want to change, if you want to learn, I'm here. But you need to do the work. There was a long pause, and then Jessica spoke again, her voice steadier now. I will, Mom. I promise. I will. I felt a bittersweet relief flood over me. This wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a perfect reunion, but it was a start. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to rebuild something real. I love you, Jessica. Always have, always will. I love you too, Mom. And with that, we ended the call. I sat there in silence for a long time, letting the words hang in the air, knowing that this was a beginning, not an end, for both of us. Time, I've come to realize, is a peculiar thing. It doesn't always heal wounds immediately. Sometimes it just gives you the space to understand the hurt. It lets you breathe long enough to make sense of the broken pieces, and it offers you a chance to rebuild slowly, piece by piece. The months that passed after Jessica's call, after she and Daniel began to reach out, were a blur of small steps. But those steps, no matter how slow, meant something. They mattered. Daniel, for the first time in years, came by more frequently. At first, it was awkward, the silence between us heavy, as if we were still learning how to talk to each other again. But the more he came, the more I could see the change in him. He wasn't the same person who had walked away all those years ago. There was a sincerity in his words now, a quiet understanding that hadn't been there before. He would sit with me for hours, just talking about life, about his children, about the mistakes he had made and the ones he feared making again. It wasn't the easy kind of conversation we once had, filled with laughter and lightheartedness. It was deeper, rawer, but it was real. He no longer seemed like the son I had lost. He felt like someone I could connect with again, in a way I hadn't thought possible. And then, there was Jessica. After her divorce, she came to me more often. At first, it was tentative, her voice still carrying the weight of her mistakes, her regrets. She would sit in silence at my kitchen table, waiting for me to say something, to offer some kind of advice. I didn't always know the right words, but I listened. That was the least I could do. Over time, she began to change, just as Daniel had. I could see her becoming more aware of her choices, learning from the pain she had endured. She started asking me for advice, seeking my thoughts on the kind of life she wanted to build for herself. She didn't know how to trust again, how to open herself up, but I could tell she was trying to heal, trying to be better. And so, the three of us began to rebuild, in our own way. There were no grand gestures, no sudden moments of revelation, but the conversations got easier. The silences weren't so heavy. And for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of my children's presence again. One day I received a call from Jessica and Daniel. They told me they had planned something special for me, something I wasn't supposed to know about yet. I was confused at first. "What do you mean, something special?" I asked. My curiosity piqued. "We'll tell you when you get here, Mom," Jessica said with a soft laugh, a note of excitement in her voice. "Just trust us." I had no idea what to expect. Maybe they had planned a dinner, or perhaps a small gift. I wasn't sure, but I couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something even better. When I arrived at the house, my heart nearly stopped. The moment I stepped out of the car, I was hit with a wave of familiarity. The house I had sold, the house I had thought I would never see again. There it was, standing tall, as it had when I first walked through its doors all those years ago. But it wasn't the same house I had left behind. The front door swung open, and Jessica stood there, smiling like I had never seen her smile before. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said, her voice full of warmth and sincerity. "The house has always been ours, and now it's back in its rightful place. Welcome home." My breath caught in my chest as I looked around. The house had been transformed. It wasn't grand or flashy. There were no expensive renovations, no lavish decorations, but it was filled with the simple details I had always loved. The soft colors of the walls, the familiar photographs, the feel of the rooms that had once been the heart of our family. It felt like home again. Daniel stepped forward then, his expression soft, sincere. We both want you to know how much we value you, Mom. We've taken so long to realize it, but we see you now. We see everything you did for us." Tears welled in my eyes as I stood there, looking from one to the other. My children, my grown children, finally understood. The weight of their words, the sincerity in their eyes, made my heart swell. It was a moment I had waited for my entire life, and now it was here. "We've missed so much, Mom," Jessica continued, "and we want to make up for it. We want to start over. This is the first of many moments we'll have together. We promise." As I looked at them, I felt a wave of emotion crash over me. It wasn't just relief, it was peace. I realized in that moment that I had finally received what I had always wanted, not perfection, not a flawless family, but something better. Understanding, respect, love, and most importantly, a chance to rebuild. I stepped inside, the house feeling like it had been waiting for me all this time. The familiar warmth, the old memories, they weren't gone. They were just waiting for the right moment to return, and that moment had come. As we gathered around the table for the small celebration they had organized, no extravagant gifts, no fanfare, just a quiet dinner, I smiled. For the first time in a long time, I felt that familiar sense of belonging. My family was here, in a way they hadn't been before. They were here with me, not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be, and that was enough. As the evening wore on, I looked around at my children, now adults, but with the promise of a new chapter. The past was still there, but it no longer had the power to control us. We were no longer trapped by the mistakes of the past. We were free. "I'm proud of you both," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm proud of how far we've come." And in that moment, I realized something else. It wasn't just the house that had come back into my life, it was them, my children, and with them, my family had returned. This was the beginning of something new, and this time it was ours. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.